So are we ever in for a treat today? This is a piece that appeared on Salon, but is originally from She-Folk. And it is called My Online Dating Horror Show, which is basically a woman gets domestically violence abused long distance, let's say. She experiences long distance domestic violence. Now, what is She-Folk? Let me see here. It's basically a website or board intended to utilize diverse voices, talents, and experiences relating to women. So let's take a look at the team. Well, she might be. Looks white though. White, and white. Wow. That's really diverse right there. That's a real diverse team. I think we possibly have one. Yes, it looks like we have the co-founder, editor-in-chief. Looks to be of Spanish or Hispanic origin, descent, with Viva la Mujer. I believe that would be. I don't know. I studied some basic Spanish. Mujer is woman. So let's get back to the article because this will go on for quite some time. It began as a fun flitting in my chest. Smile and daydream-inducing, goofily sarsarine, the way most beginnings of good things are. I don't know if I'm actually going to read this word for word because it's so much bullshit. In other words, talk about nothing. We began as strangers on the internet, a combination of polite questions, witty banter, and explicit flirtation, enhanced with sexually explicit images, as we'll find out later, kept us both delightfully entertained and engaged. After a couple of weeks of messaging, we mutually expressed interest to meet in person. I was as hesitant as I was eager. I had never met anyone online before, or even been on so much as a blind date. So I prepared myself with some liquid courage and dropped in for a drink at the bar where he worked. This, I assume, should have been another red flag. This guy obviously was trying to date rape her, wasn't he? Just drink her under the bar and drag her home. It turned out wonderfully, exceeding my expectations. He even looked better than he did in his pictures. Why isn't that? We kept up a clever and stimulating rapport. I only felt mildly awkward, that giddy kind of awkward I think you're supposed to feel when you care about connecting with someone new. We shared a very fun makeout session. Okay, this just gets sort of light porn. The next evening we went to a bar in our shared neighborhood where we asked each other about work and family, and hometowns and hobbies and lots of ands. And she apparently agreed to go to his place. Now, they didn't apparently have sex. But it says, because she says, we didn't sleep together, but we were intimate and we both enjoyed it. What does that mean? That's not exactly explicit. You can sleep without having sex with someone. So I get what she's insinuating here or implying here, but I think that's what she meant. I left his house that night. Okay, we didn't sleep. So that means that she left before before anyone went to sleep. At her own insistence, he told me how he couldn't wait to see me again, to take me out to dinner to his favorite restaurant, and to go on more dates with me after that. So he seems like a genuine guy who's interested in her. Now, she was smitten, And here is a man who I shared a strong chemistry with, found to be incredibly attractive because we know exactly how important that is. You betas out there should pay attention. If you are unattractive, it doesn't really matter. Where was I? Incredibly attractive, impressed me with his professional work and personal aspirations, kept me laughing and interested, exhibited a real openness and sincere interest in me, and was thus far kind, attentive, and intelligent. So, this is Prince Charming, basically. The next day, I left New York to return home for the holidays. A few hours into my day, I received a text from him. He told me he missed me. Now, this is when she starts getting touchy. I was undeniably pleased, yet something was unsettled in me at the same time. Because he missed her, and he texted her the next day, basically. Like, love you, miss you. Yeah, that unsettled her. She began wondering how clingy this man really... She began to wonder how this man, who really didn't know me well at all, could already be missing me. Now, doesn't that sort of contradict what you said above, where you're talking about how many things you shared in common and you loved his work ethic? It seems a little bit contradictory, in my opinion. I miss yous, in her opinion, were reserved for friends and lovers who had seen me through at least a round of emotional highs and lows, and as we are about to see, things are about to get emotionally high. I chose to ignore the remark and instead responded with a filler question, trying gently to redirect the conversation because you are a controlling little dominant. Pejorative. This became a pattern over the next week during our physical separation. Well, maybe he continued to say that I miss you, so hoping you would say you miss him too, but apparently you were not interested in saying that. You apparently did not miss him. So he kept after it because you kept sort of spurring him. You kept turning him down. It's like when someone says, I love you, and it is not reciprocated, if you know what I mean here. But I continued to bypass his declarations in an attempt at the pace I felt comfortable with, instead of coming straight out and saying, I'm not comfortable with how fast this relationship is going, even though above you stated that everything was just swimmingly good. But, if you were not comfortable going at that pace, you should have spoken up and told him so. Anyway, I was excited to get to know him more and see just how well our chemistry could hold up and evolve, but at a reasonable pace. Again, you never told him that, according to your account. Not in a way that felt forced. I was happily committed to the idea of returning to New York after the holidays to pick up where we left off, and in the meantime continuing to talk to one another about daily happenings if we felt like it. I wanted to revel in the newness, carefree and lighthearted. That's how beginnings work, right? I imagine that is subjective, but okay, let's say it is. But dozens of quote, I miss you text messages soon accumulated in him asking me if I was seeing anyone else. Yes, because you continued to ignore his message. You continued to redirect the conversation elsewhere, leading him to wonder if you were seeing someone else, if you had lost interest in him. I told him the truth. Finally, thank God you told him the truth. I wasn't exclusive with anyone at that point, and that yes, I had been seeing other people. So maybe that is why. If you'd just been honest with him right away, maybe he wouldn't have text messaged you quite so many I misuse. Ever consider that? No, apparently not. He then asked me to stop seeing anyone else and be exclusive with him, which is understandable for someone who wants a monogamous relationship, is it not? Dating for me and many of my peers is a process, good, bad, and ugly, where you mingle more with various individuals until you come across one you wish to divert most or all of your energy towards and enter into an exclusive relationship with. Doesn't it take time and a certain level of knowing, deeper than physical intimacy, to connect with someone and to make that choice to actively commit to each other? Now, in the back of my mind, I keep recalling where you had this long heart-to-heart talk where so many of your goals aligned with so many of his goals, that you loved his work ethic, his family life, his personality, his looks, as superficial as that may be. So apparently he got the notion that the relationship was already going faster than you felt it was. Anyway, I told him I wanted to know him more and spend more time with him, but I didn't feel comfortable making any promises to him at that point. What kind of promises? Like maybe a date in the future? I'm just wondering. Any promises you couldn't make someone you are romantically don't deny you are romantically interested in this person. You couldn't make them any promises. I said this repeatedly in a wide assortment of language as he continued to fight me on my stance. Perrin's red flag. You're not allowed to attempt to change anyone's stance on anything, obviously. I kept trying to meet him where he was at. No, you weren't. You were trying to make him meet you where you were at, unwilling to compromise your position in the slightest. Trying to be kind, but getting more firm as his pitch heightened and his tone darkened. How can you tell if a tone is darkened? Are these text messages now or phone calls? And as he continued to balk at my ideas of dating. Because your ideas are the right ones and his are the wrong ones, am I right? His remarks varied from, quote, why do you need to be with other guys, to, quote, but didn't we have such a good time, to, I don't sleep around. All excellent points for somebody seeking a monogamous relationship. He would waver between machine gun-paced question after question, without room for any response, drawn out textalogues on the subject, and even threatening to cease talking to me completely. Yes, so many red flags there. Am I right? It would seem to me that after a swimmingly good start, that you have less in common with each other than you initially thought. Maybe you should have agreed to disengage with each other and just, okay, pick up the phone, okay? I understand the convenience of text messaging, but sometimes you just need to talk to clear things, person to person. If you can't in person to person, then talk on the phone, okay? But stop the text messaging. There is so much lost in translation, so much body language, so much emotional language that comes from your voice that is lost in just plain text. In retrospect, it's clear to me that, first off, his assumptions about me being promiscuous are not valid to make in response to what I told him of my dating style, and regardless, my promiscuity, assumed or not, is not reserved for his or anyone else's judgment. Wrong! Anyone with whom you are about to become romantically involved is perfectly not validated in judging your promiscuity. I'm sorry. But if I am dating somebody, I would like to know who they're sleeping around with. And if I agree with that, I'm going to ask you to stop. This is the whole mentality that the actions are without any personal consequence. Moreover, his attempts to persuade me away from my position were antagonistic and clearly meant to confuse me, corner me, and discredit the answers I had already given him. Nothing hurts these people more than discrediting or invalidating experiences. Now, I'm not sure what led her to this conclusion, but you are perfectly within your right to attempt to persuade or otherwise alter a person's position on a given subject, such as your unwillingness to commit to a monogamous relationship in this instance. That is not being bullied. If you have no interest in it, make that clear. Don't say maybe. Quit leading this man on as if there is a maybe if it's a no. Plain and simple, the beginnings of a relationship should not feel like being bullied. You felt like you were being bullied. You didn't bother asking him how he felt. Apparently he felt a little hurt after you continuously ignored his "I miss you" texts. Not yet distanced enough from the situation then, I wasn't able to perfectly articulate the discomfort I felt, but I knew that I had to end the loop of conversation. I told him that we could agree to disagree, but I would not make a promise of monogamy to him at the time, and I figured he would take it or leave it. This is good. You are finally being honest with him, and I applaud you for taking that action finally. Not yet distanced enough from the situation then, I wasn't able to perfectly... Okay, I already read that. After that conversation, I began to reevaluate my feelings about relationships. After all, if one relationship's bad, they all must be, right? My conviction had become shockingly muddled, because you are obviously a very confused and egotistically fragile individual. I began questioning my own motives, dredging up negative thoughts about myself, and thinking that maybe his affection and persistence was romantic and that I was just fearful, stubborn, or a little too hurt from prior relationships to be able to receive his affection openly or even correctly. Self-reflection is a virtue, but be careful not to dwell overly on the more negative aspects of your flawed personality, please. You will send your poor little self, snowflake, into a spiraling depression. Obviously, you are so sensitive. But obviously, there is more baggage here than was first communicated, as she has admittedly had bad relationships in the past, but she doesn't get too into that. Was I refusing to commit to someone because I was scared of all the things that are scary about monogamous relationships? What? What's scary? A long-term commitment. Are you unwilling to make long-term commitments? Are you afraid that maybe you will just have to settle for one person instead of having them all? What exactly is scary about a monogamous relationship over a more friends with benefits relationship? Just curious. Out of self-preservation or self-restraint? What was really so bad about his offer? What's wrong with wanting to be with just one person? Wasn't I tired of being alone? Didn't I ultimately want to be partnered? All a bunch of insightful questions. Unfortunately, she did not have the intellectual honesty to answer them, apparently. I now see his insistent and repetitive professions of his desire for me and his edict to maintain only monogamous relationships as manipulative and possessive, because he's a man, and men are possessive and entitled. It wasn't because he legitimately missed you. It's because he was entitled to you, wasn't it? Be honest. Men always manipulating the emotions of women. It wasn't like you ever did the same to him by ignoring his advances repeatedly, redirecting the subject of the conversation before telling him that basically you were unwilling to commit to his idea of a relationship in any way, shape, or form. His dogged and combative dissection of an inability to respect my stance was a refusal to accept my terms, to hear me, to value my experience about a relationship. I told you there's nothing that hurts these people worse than to disregard their experiences. And her idea of relationship was the one that was correct, you see. He was completely out of bounds. I was supposed to be an integral part of the relationship, that is. The next day, he reached out to me as though nothing had happened. To me, that meant he was taking it, relinquishing his evil manipulative control, and finally understanding my boundaries and respecting them. I was pleased. I felt heard. I thought I had been heard. On a walk with my mother, I told her what had happened with him in the past week. She asked me questions about him that I didn't know the answers to, specifically romantic relationship history. So ask him. There's nothing worse than beginning a relationship on false pretenses. If you cannot be honest with the person you're interested in, it's a doomed relationship. She was right. There was use in knowing this information, but the truth of the matter was we hadn't even gotten to the basic and inevitable point yet, knowing each other. And yet you talked earlier in the article about how much you had in common. Again, parent red flag. I figured, though, as adamant as he seemed to be about forging forward with our relationship, he would be forthcoming and even pleased about my interest in such information. I asked about his last relationship. I asked when his last relationship had been and if he had ever been married. He answered very openly and without apprehension. We continued to text the rest of the day about Christmas presents and seeing family, and what high-calorie holiday treat we were scarfing down. Playful, easy banter, and the kind of open admissions and revelations that pepper a beginning. I thought this was a great sign. Our paths now close to potentially merging. Again, there is so much lost in text. Why didn't you talk to him? Why didn't he talk to you? It's a fair question. I direct at both parties. Yet you're the one making all these accusations. Well, are about to anyway. That night I slept on my parents' couch in a dark and quiet house, filled with my mother, stepfather, brother, sister-in-law, niece, and newborn nephew snoozing peacefully just thin walls away. I awoke in the middle of the night to him calling me several times in a row with a barrage of text messages frantically denigrating and interrogating me about my questions from earlier in the day. Clearly, something had been aroused in him, even if his response was extremely delayed. I answered his phone call in an effort to stop the buzzing and whispered in shock, "What is going on?" "Thank you. You finally spoke to him." He spoke in a voice that I didn't recognize. That doesn't exactly surprise me considering how little talking you actually do. distraught, high-pitched, saturated with tears. I felt bad, truly. I had no intention of causing him any anguish, and I was dumbfounded. The questions I had asked about his previous romantic history quite obviously had upset him, but he had showed me no sign of this earlier in the day when the conversation was present. As his confession of sadness and vulnerability turned into aggression and hostility, I cut him off. Did you just invalidate his experience? Did you? You cut him off. Here is a man who is showing emotion. And when he gets a little passionate, how can you determine aggression? Did he threaten you? But when he got apparently a bit passionate about the way he felt, you cut him off like a total bitch. I told him I was very sorry I had upset him in any way, but that this was much too intense for me. That I was going back to sleep, and to please stop texting and calling me that night. I hung up and watched as my phone lit up with text message after text message of expletive and insult. Yeah, because you kind of fucking cut him off. You see, in a relationship, people need to be able to freely communicate with one another. And that includes the good and the bad. Now, if you cannot accept or help him in any way when he is at his potentially most vulnerable, and you just cut him off like a callous bitch, it is understandable that would enrage him, that would make him mad that you would do that. That somebody he obviously cares about would treat him this way. So, we have a little list of words that she was called. Creepy, cunt, bitch, fuck you, fuck off. Which, considering the circumstances, I do not feel were actually uncalled for. You were sort of a bitch to him. I sat in the dark in my mom's living room, panic rising in my chest. This man was obviously going to rape her. I was mad and sad and scared, not knowing where any of this was coming from, not recognizing this person, not understanding how I was being made to feel like I'd done something wrong. Because you stupid, obtuse bitch, you did. God. If you feel like you've done something wrong, there is a good chance that you might have. But obviously, being a woman, you are excused from any blame, aren't you? Not recognizing this person. You know what? When somebody... You didn't know the full side of him, like you admitted earlier. There were more sides to him than you thought, apparently. All you saw was the dispassionate side, apparently. But even so, if this person is like schizophrenic or something, you did the wrong thing. Instead of talking through it with him, you played the I feel threatened card with someone talking to you on the other end of a phone after, conversing through only text messages for however many days or weeks. I thought about the times I had been in physical contact with him, sitting close to him, savoring his lips on my neck, looking into his eyes. I thought about the sweet nothings and the I miss yous he'd said to me. All of a sudden, they took a sinister meaning. Predator. I thought about how I had looked forward to dinner with him at his favorite restaurant. I thought about how smitten I had been. I thought of the naked pictures of myself I had sent him. Willingly? Why did you? I thought about the sexual fantasies I'd shared with him. It seems to me this relationship was based from the beginning on sex, even though you never actually engaged in it, because you talk about how little you know about him, and yet you are sharing naked pictures and sexual fantasies with him. What the actual fuck, woman? I thought about the fact that he lived within walking distance to my brand new apartment waiting for me back in New York. I thought about when he told me he just wanted to hold me. Again, it takes a sinister meaning. Strangle you. Yeah. I thought about how much bigger he was than me. I thought about the tone of his voice I had just heard coming over the phone. It was distraught. It was emotional. And men are never allowed to show emotion. Isn't that right, feminists? The minute a man shows emotion, all of a sudden he's being threatening and aggressive. Right. Am I right? I thought about the hateful messages he was now sending me. You know what? It sounded like he was calling you names. He was pissed off. He just basically flipped you off and said, you know what? Fuck you. You're acting like a bitch, and I'm calling you out on it. I thought about how he was continuing to lash out without restraint as my phone buzzed over and over again. Just block it? Turn it off? I don't know. If it is distressing you to this point, I think you might consider taking action to mitigate your source of distress. In this case, that would be getting you away from your phone and getting you off Twitter, obviously. This is the kind of person who gets PTSD from Twitter. I bet he was yelling at her in caps, too. Like, you bitch! In caps, yeah. I thought about how unsafe I felt in that moment. Miles away from him, in my family's home, where no one would let anything bad happen to me. Why the fuck are you feeling unsafe and you insecure, you fragile snowflake? I thought about how all of this could have been my fault. I had first gone to him after all. I had sent the pictures. I had been flirtatious and explicitly sexual. I had gone down on him and let it... What the actual fuck? I had gone down on him and let... So obviously she gave him a blowjob and fucked him. Now, earlier on, you never conceded that. You said you went to his place but didn't sleep with him. You never mentioned any actual sexual activity. And I believe you explicitly stated there was nothing that serious. Okay, you're just jumping all over the place, I get it. A lot more happened than we actually knew about. And you continued to talk to him. But I realized his hostility was not justifiable. You are obviously entitled to act as bitchy and mean as you want to him with zero repercussions. Because in your world, actions don't have consequences, motherfucker. No hostility makes any person in any relationship feel unsafe is justifiable. You know what? Feeling unsafe is subjective. I could feel unsafe in my house if I had some paranoid delusions about the basement. It goes back to the whole college campus thing. If a campus feels unsafe, then you must take action to make it feel safe. If one person feels unsafe, that's unacceptable. Because your feelings, bottom period, line period. I stopped talking to him. I acknowledged and owned my feelings. I had already made my position clear to him, and I made it clear for myself once more. I disengaged with him on my social networks. I walked cautiously around my neighborhood. Yes, you know what? I know you're leaving a whole shit ton of detail out of your story, but did he ever, in any of his messages, actually threaten physical harm to you? What gave you this irrational fear of him besides the tone of his voice when he was most vulnerable? When he was hurting and you just hung up on him like a complete asshole. Slowly the pit of uneasiness I carried around faded as I didn't run into him and I didn't hear from him. Until one night, a month later, I did. Quote, "It's freezing tonight. What are you up to?" I stared at my phone in disbelief. You motherfucker, how dare you contact me? I removed you from all my social networks. I want nothing. I want you out of my life. I sat alone in my apartment, the panic rising in my stomach. What was this perfectly reasonable person going to do to me? I looked to my cat for comfort, because forever aloners always have cats. I'm kidding. It's a terrible stereotype, isn't it? Hoping she would, in her own cat way, understand the fear in my eyes. How could he so casually approach me, so completely disregarding the happenings of a month prior? Maybe he understood that the relationship was going too fast, that he needed to just back off and give you some space, let the situation cool down and diffuse itself. Had he no concept of the impact of his aggressions? You fuckward. No, you fucking didn't. You fucker. What were the impacts of his aggression? What aggressions? He called you up, crying. Is that aggression now? You broke this man, and you're now calling him aggressive when he calls you up crying. And then tells you to fuck off because you were rude to him when he was at his most vulnerable. How could something be apparently so behind him? Behind. How could something be apparently so behind to him and so distressing to me? Obviously, you're completely incompatible. I don't know why you even bothered with this guy to begin with. Oh, that's right. He was smoking hot, wasn't he? I was angry and confused and scared all over again. Man, woman, you just like that. I would hate for anything in the real world to actually traumatize you, because you would probably end up in a psych ward if all that it takes to make you angry, confused, and scared is a one text message. One innocent text message. It's not like he said, I'm coming over to kill you. For fuck's sake. And he was apparently all NBD. He was able to shake it off, or never even have to feel the weight of insecurity and fear to begin with. Yeah, you know what? When somebody cries, isn't that a feeling of insecurity and fear? You fucker. It's always about you, isn't it? Did you ever ask him how he felt? No, he was supposed to telepathically know your feelings and how afraid you felt because he broke down in front of you. You bitch. I thought this was something I had already dealt with and conquered, but the truth is, the experience changed me. As short-lived as it was, its effects endured in me, and I felt all the feelings again very clearly that night. Yes, you were long-distance threatened by a man who was crying to you. You were threatened by that. You hypersensitive bitch. I googled self-defense online and ordered pepper spray. Obviously, somebody saying, hey, what's up, nothing says, hey, I'm coming to murder you or rape you, than saying, how you doing? God, woman, you are paranoid out of your fucking mind. I never responded and have not heard from him since. But I, in quotes, see him everywhere. I was sitting on a subway car the other night, and I swore he walked into my car. I hid my head in my hood and reached into my purse, clutching my lipstick-sized mace. I quickly realized it wasn't him, and a substantial amount of tension faded away, but the panic continued to bubble inside me for the next hour. Why didn't you just go to the conductor and say, this man here, he reminds me of someone who I think might rape me. He never actually did, but this guy reminds me of a guy who I think might. So why don't you just kick his butt off? Yeah. Because no one should ever feel fear, however irrational or completely fucked up they are. I stumble on my step each time I, quote, see him in the distance down the street. Yeah, I think what you mean is when you see a man, you automatically assume it's him and he's just coming to get you, bitch. It has always turned out to be just another man that looks like him. But in that moment, my stomach drops. Many days when I walk my dogs around the neighborhood, I avoid blocks near his. When they drag me there, I tug them along, fearful to take our time, teeth clenched until we round a corner. You know what? You sound like a complete fucking nutter, woman. This irrational fear of somebody who didn't actually threaten you with anything. If anything, you hurt him more, as he obviously had a traumatic relationship before this one. Now, I know you said, Bo, yeah, you had a traumatic one too. You didn't get into it. But these are exact people who get PTSD from reading stuff online. Maybe it is real. Maybe there are actually nutcases out there like this that belong in a psych ward. That's all I can say. You obviously are not fit to handle the real world. He was never once physically abusive to me and never threatened me with any physical violence. But the power behind his words, I think you mean behind his voice, his tone. When he broke down in front of you, you felt threatened physically. How the fuck? Where were you brought up? And just as I didn't expect that, I understand the potential from any form of abuse can come without warning. Yes, you heard it here, people. Breaking down and crying to somebody is officially considered abuse. Let's sign it into a law and start arresting guys for showing their goddamn emotions. You know, because feminism is all about getting men to show their emotions, right? My world now feels smaller, my hands shakier, my security compromised, my sense of self was tugged at and unraveled. I cannot even imagine the anguish that one carries as a result of long-term physical, sexual abuse. Like I said, she would be in a nutter house if that ever happened. Any real-life altercation, she's gone like that. She is a fragile snowflake, fresh from Tumblr. I'm learning how to feel safe and strong on my own, and in the unpredictable world in which we all live. You're not fit for the world. I'm pretty sure you live in an entirely different universe than most of us, but okay. I had made myself somewhat vulnerable to this person as he had to you. And he unfortunately did not enhance that journey, but instead threatened it by crying in a phone call. And then telling you when you hung up on him, when he was trying to relate his experience to you, you hung up on him, and then he called you an asshole, a bitch, a cunt for doing that. And that threatened it. That threatened your fragile little confidence, didn't it? I've gained from this experience to reclaim my safety. and strength, to listen to myself carefully always, to use and trust my voice, to adhere to my own boundaries and my own pace. This does not mean I regret being flirtatious, intrigued, smitten. This does not mean I regret going out with him or going home with him. I only regret the doubt and condemnation I laid upon myself. You're out there. I don't know. That was just like totally contradictory to the point you made before that, where you laid all the blame on him. Yeah, and that you made yourself vulnerable and you regretted that because when he broke down crying to you, you felt physically threatened. From my own journey, and as a final ode to this man, I promise that in future romantic relationships, I will engage in subtle and explicit. You know what? Somehow those two words contradict each other. Being explicit is pretty much the exact opposite of being subtle. Anyway, I will engage in subtle and explicit sexual dialogue with images if I please, until I don't want to, because fuck you, I'm woman, here you are, right? And fuck the consequences too. If you break more men, that's perfectly fucking okay, because you can go whining and whinging off about your precious feelings when a man cried to you. I will continue to go out to bars and to dinner and to parties and enjoy the companionship until I don't want to, because relationships are never about compromise. They're all about precious fucking you. I will again be physically intimate in exciting, arousing, consensual activities. I wonder if he asked every step of the way in that. Yeah, that would be funny. Consensual. Until I don't want to. Even if that means smack. Wow, she actually uses smack fucking middle of any act. So, yeah, you might want to avoid this person. Even if, yep. Sounds like she just, when you're in the middle of it, yeah, she'd be the kind of callous bitch that would tell him to just go limp. No consideration at all. I mean, I'm not saying there should be any entitlement here, but gee whiz, the level of self-entitlement on her end is astronomical. I'm seriously flabbergasted by this one. I will not blame myself when someone else makes me feel unsafe. I will not disparage myself for not wanting the same things as someone else. I will not vilify myself for having sensitivities. But you sure as hell will vilify men for, won't you, you bitch, you cocksucking cunt motherfucker? I will leave it. I will not take it. Yes, that's right. Use them and lose them. They're just men after all. They're not people. And I support anyone who felt threatened to do the same. Remember, feelings. That is just so depressing. Thank you. If you got all the way through this, thank you very much for listening. And until next time, farewell.